Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and this is a vlog of my late autism and ADHD diagnosis, and sometimes I also talk about my memory disorder and having multisensory aphantasia. Sorry, I'm like really wiggly today, like sensory wise, like everything is just not right and I can't get it right, so we're just gonna have to cope. I probably could pull my hair up, but you know, vanity. I like having my hair down when I'm filming most of the time. So that's part of the autistic mask. Sometimes we choose to have a sensory discomfort because of whatever reason. And this time the reason is vanity, because I am having a good hair day and I want to show off my curls. And that should be a good enough reason. Today's video is going to talk a little bit about masking, but I also want to talk about something called alexithymia, and I don't know, there's just a lot of good things that I think we'll cover in this video. As my longtime followers know, I process out loud. I don't script. I pretty much talk stream of consciousness. That's how I like to run my vlog. So the other day I kind of had this like aha moment where I realized I had some internalized ableism, because nobody is immune from being ableist. It's systemic in our society, and it's something that you have to consciously work on deconstructing. And so even disabled people can be ableist, and they can be ableist towards other people, and they can be ableist towards themselves. So I had some internalized ableism towards myself, and that is that I was realizing that I am feeling a lot of embarrassment about my anxiety. And this comes from my autistic mask. So before I realized I was autistic, I was very high masking, and I'm been working, as y'all know, to kind of tear down the mask and like get to know who I am behind the mask. And as y'all's heard in many videos, my mask was something that I like to say ran neurotypical.exe. And it's not necessarily right, but it's what my brain created as a survival mechanism to try to have me blend in with my society. And so the code that I like to say it would run through is that I always had to be perfect. I always had to be a good girl, and that I always had to put other people's comfort ahead of my own. Those were like the three, there's other things, but those were the three big things that pretty much anything that I do or did would go through those filters before I would make decisions or choices or speak. And if you can imagine having to run through that, and it was all subconscious. I had no awareness that it was happening at all. My brain just did this as a default. It's exhausting and wears you out, and that's what leads to autistic burnout by the time you're 40, and some people it happens a lot sooner. They hit burnout in their 20s. Somehow I managed to make it till 40, and I think, going on a tangent here because I'm ADHD also, I think I was able to go longer without hitting a massive burnout because I married a very supportive husband, and I didn't have to work to support myself. My husband supports me, and I was a stay-at-home mom and a homeschool mom, and I was able to have more control over my environment, which meant that even though I was still like masking, I didn't have to mask as much as if I, had worked outside the home, right? So I think that for not everyone, but a lot of autistic people, if they have to get a job right out of college and they hit the road working, they might hit burnout sooner. Unless they have a job that just happens to naturally work with their autistic needs. Anyway, go back to why I'm talking about my mask again, is because, and I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, because again, it's not the truth. It's just what my mask created because of society. So it's working with society's rules, right? And my interpretation of those rules as a little child. And so in my mind, people who were anxious weren't perfect. And again, this was all at the subconscious level. This is literally therapy helping me understand what was happening and putting words and language to it, right? So somebody who has a lot of anxiety wouldn't be perfect because, they would have to be like relying on other people, or I don't even know, right? This is obviously, again, it's not true. You can be an anxious person, and it's not even that you could be anxious and perfect. It's like perfect doesn't exist and shouldn't be a goal that we're working towards. Like, that's kind of more my point. But my brain didn't know that. And so my therapist asked, like, well, what did you do when you were anxious before you got diagnosed? And I was like, no, I couldn't even admit that to myself. Like, I didn't have the word. My brain would not say that I was anxious about things. So if I was in a situation that I was really anxious about, I would either, my flight response would kick in, and I would do anything I could to just avoid or get out of that situation without talking about it or discussing it. I was just like shut down and just, depending on what it was, I would just get out of it. Like if it was going to a new event, I'd be like, oh no, I don't want to go to that. I'm not going to do it. And I wouldn't say, oh, it's because I'm anxious about going to the event. It'd be because, oh, I think it's going to be stupid. I'm not going to do that. So I would flight mode, just get away from it. At most I could say, oh, I'm a little worried about doing something, but I would never ever say that I was anxious because I didn't have that. My brain would not let me identify that as, I don't know if anxiety is an emotion, but it wouldn't let me even consider that I could be anxious about something. And so I never really developed good coping mechanisms around anxiety because I never could admit that I was anxious about anything. So if you don't even have like a word to describe what you could be feeling, there's no way to handle it, right? So now that I'm unmasking and I'm like, oh, I'm really anxious about whatever situation, I don't necessarily have any built up coping mechanisms for it. And I also started to realize that I was getting really embarrassed about my anxiety, which also leads to a different type of shutdown, right? So to give a example, because y'all know me, I like to give concrete examples for you to be able to relate to. That's how my brain works a little bit better. When I'm watching a presentation and somebody's just talking in theory, it doesn't really land for me until, give me a real life example, right? So I put my life on the line to help y'all kind of understand a little bit. Maybe you can see yourself in my stories, right? So the other day, this was actually several weeks ago, a friend and I, we were going to go. I'm going to be a little vague on purpose because respecting privacy of some of my life and my friends, right? But you'll get the idea. So we were going to go somewhere, and it was going to be possibly just take the morning, but it was kind of open-ended, and we might have been gone for longer than just the morning. And I was already going to rely on her for transportation, which was already feeling like me a big ask, because again, part of my mask was to be completely, and it was part of my mask, and it was also a way to hide a lot of my anxiety because I couldn't identify anxiety. So one way that I hid it was being completely independent and in control of a situation. So the fact that I was asking her to drive to this, already kind of took away some of my control, because now she's in charge of where we're going to be and when we're going to leave. Kinda. I mean, not like she's kidnapping me, but just my brain that we're talking about. So I keep going like this because it feels like I have stuff in my teeth, which I don't. It's like I said, I'm having a very sensory day. Okay. So it was kind of open-ended how long this thing was going to ask. And so as an autistic person, I'm kind of always thinking about food. Not in an unhealthy way. It's just if I don't eat, I'm going to get dysregulated. So I have to have like a routine to want to eat, because also I don't always get hunger cues. So I eat like on a schedule. So that way I know that I can like maintain and not get too hungry, right? So I'm just kind of always aware of when food's going to be. So since I didn't know exactly how long we were going to be gone, I'm like, are we going to need to, like, what are we going to do about lunch? Or will we be done before lunch? Like, I didn't even know. And most people would probably be like, well, just ask your friend. Or talk to them about it. Like, hey, what do we, But because in my brain, I was already asking this big like favor, will you drive me? All of a sudden, I got completely in my head about lunch. Like, that this was the most ridiculous thing to be worried about or ask about. Which is where anxiety comes from, right? Like, anxiety doesn't always make sense. It's not logical. Sometimes it could be, but not, like, a lot of times it's just completely illogical. And I'm like, should I bring a snack? Should I not? Should I ask her? I don't want to make a big deal out of this. Maybe she only wanted to spend the morning with me. Maybe she didn't want to spend all day with me. And part of the anxiety comes from having CPTSD around friendships. So many times in my life, I try to make myself small and accommodating to other people, like keep other people's comfort ahead of my own, so that I'm more palatable to them. And the more I make things complicated, makes it feel like at some point they're going to be like, oh my God, this is too much. We're just like, go with it, wing it. Let's go with the flow. Why are you making a big deal of it? If like, this is all going in my head. This isn't my friend. This is all me in my head. My brain is saying like, if we're out and about and it's lunchtime, we'll stop and get lunch. Like, it's no big deal. But to me, it was a big deal. So I was super, super anxious about it. But then I was embarrassed about the anxiety, because to me, I'm making a big deal out of something that I shouldn't. And, anytime we say shouldn't, that should be a flag that like, hey, there's not very many shoulds in this world. But in my mind, it was something I shouldn't be anxious about. So then I got embarrassed about that anxiety. And I ended up masking and not talking about the anxiety and not dealing with it. I'm just going to force myself to go with the flow. I'm not recommending anybody do that. But sometimes, you're just, as an autistic person, we're just doing the best we can, right? We're just trying to do the best we can to navigate a situation. And you might be thinking, well, if she's your friend, she's going to understand. But see, that's the problem with CPTSD and having so many friends, that people that I consider friends give up on me in my life, ghost me, end the relationship over a misunderstanding, that kind of thing. Like, it triggers such a response to like be accommodating as possible. So that's where I am with all of this right now. Like, this aha realization that, not only am I getting anxious when, even though I got anxious before my diagnosis, I just didn't know it. I'm now feeling embarrassed about my anxiety. And the reason why I brought up the word alexithymia means that a lot of autistic people have a hard time understanding our emotions or what we're feeling. This happened a couple weeks ago, and it took me until yesterday. Like, it wasn't like I was thinking about it. It just like, probably in the back of my mind, like percolating. It took me that long to identify that I was feeling embarrassed about that anxiety. Like, that feeling, I was there, but I didn't have a word for it. Like, I was like, what's going on with this? So, that's the alexithymia. It took a long time for me to process what the emotion and feeling I was feeling. So now I realize, and the reason why I called it internalized ableism is because anxiety happens, and feeling embarrassed about it isn't really productive. Now, acknowledging your feelings are feelings, like, it is what it is. But I'm just trying to get to that next step. Like, okay, now what do I do about it? And so I was talking to my therapist again, like I told you. And, you know, she was encouraging me that this is something that what would have been probably more productive is, instead of trying to push through the anxiety, would be to talk to my friend. And when I told her, you know, I'm just so tired of having friends think that I'm too much. And she's like, yeah, but do you want those people in your life? And it's like, yeah, I get that. No. And I don't think this would have happened with this friend. Like, I really don't. But again, it's that CPTSD. I think this new friend that I'm making, we've been friends for several months now. So it's a newish friendship, but it's still like since like earlier this year. And she hasn't given me any indication that she's feeling like I'm too much, and I'm trying to be as unmasked as possible in her space. And we've had many conversations about autism. That CPTSD just kicks in, and it's like it wants to protect me, and my mask wants to protect me, and it wants to like do what I can to keep this friendship. But, you know, like my therapist said, don't you want it to be a genuine friendship? So you need to like find that place of vulnerability and trust yourself and your friend. And then I said, yeah, get that. And I agree with you. And I also don't want to be lonely. So sometimes like, and she's like, yeah, that is a concern, right? Like finding the people in your life that you can be your full self with is hard, but it's worth it. So, that's where I am with all of this new realization. Y'all know I like to share my aha moments in my unmasking journey. And I think this was a big kind of breakthrough. So I'm thankful for y'all who listen and who understand and get it, because not everybody does. Like if I was to tell this to some people, they would think it was like, what are you talking about? But I know many of y'all will be able to relate in some degree or form or fashion. So I appreciate y'all listening. And if you are autistic and you're watching, thank you for listening and learning. And maybe if you meet an autistic person or you have an autistic loved one, then you can kind of understand a little bit more about what's going on in our heads. Until the next video, guys. Bye.